Welcome to episode 50 of our ComfyUI tutorial series. Can you believe it's almost a year since I started the first episode? So today, to celebrate, I have more than 50 free workflows for you. I've seen a lot of questions on Discord like, how do you do posts for social media like those Instagram influencers? How do you create more realistic images? How do you make exact sizes for social media like 2K images or full HD images for shorts? I hope today's video will answer all those questions. So you already know that in ComfyUI, you can drag a workflow to the canvas to open it, or you can go to the workflow tab and click on open, then select the workflow you want to open with the .json extension. That will open the workflow with all the nodes and settings. You can close that workflow just like you close a document in Photoshop, for example. I will add all the workflows on Discord. I'll try to upload them separately so you can download only what you need, and also all together in a zip archive so you can extract it and have access to all the workflows. I included a text file with instructions on how to install them for easy access. If you don't want to search for them on your hard drive all the time, here's how I like to do it to stay organized. I copy the folders into the workflows folder. So I copy both of the folders, but if you only want to use one of the models, you can copy just that one. Then I go to where ComfyUI is installed and look for the folder called user. Inside that, you find the folder default, and then finally the folder we were looking for is workflows. I paste all the workflows here, and if you save some of your own, they should also appear here. Yes, you can organize them into folders and subfolders. You can rename the folders and workflows to make them easier for you to remember. Then you need to close ComfyUI if it was open, and restart it so it can detect those workflows. Now, if we go to the workflows folder on the left, we have the exact same folder structure. You can resize the sidebar so you can see all the text if you want, and when you click on a folder, it expands so you can see the subfolders. As you can see, I created a lot of them for both Flux and Fluxmania models. So those two models are the ones I currently use. All are tested on an RTX 4090 with 24 gigabytes of VRAM, but they should work with 12 gigabytes of VRAM or even less if you use a smaller Flux model. So why did I select those two? Because Fluxmania produces the most realistic results in people. It adds imperfections and makes images more realistic, and it's also uncensored. Flux I use because I can run it with LoRA trained on Flux Dev, and I get more vivid colors that work well for illustrations. It also has fewer imperfections since it doesn't try to be realistic. Fluxmania is an FP8 model, so from what I've heard, it doesn't seem to work on Mac. Both have advantages and disadvantages, but with these two models, I can generate most of the images I need. I created a workflow for the most popular ratios on social media. There's 2K landscape, so you can create AI images in a 16:9 ratio for YouTube and other social media. That works for landscape videos, YouTube thumbnails, or posts on X and Facebook. There's full HD 9:16 ratio for those who need images for shorts and reels. Instagram portrait with a 4:5 ratio, and of course a square ratio that works for most social media posts. Flux likes to work with multiples of 832 or 64 for width and height. So when you want to do an exact size for social media, you'll see you often can't do that exact size. Even if you put in those exact sizes, the image quality usually isn't great. So I tried to find the best settings and nodes to get exactly the size you need for social media. Let's see what workflows we have in each folder. In the basic text to image and image to image folders, we have workflows that do just that. Simple workflows with upscalers. Here's how I name the workflows. I first started with the model, so it's either Flux or Fluxmania. Then I added whether it's a text to image workflow, which means you input just text and get an image, or it can be an image to image workflow where you input your own image and a prompt to get another image. After that, I added some extra words depending on what extra features it has, like upscaler, collage, ControlNet, LoRA, so you know what it contains. I included the max image size you get after upscaling in pixels, and also the ratio, like 1:1 or 16:9, and so on. I hope the naming makes sense to you, but you can rename them however you want. Moving to the next folder, we have a few ControlNet workflows, and also one with ControlNet and LoRA. Then in the LoRA folder, we have text-to-image workflows with LoRA and an upscaler with LoRA included, so you can upscale images that were made with a certain LoRA. The last one is just an upscaler, so you can upload an image and get a bigger version. It's for AI images with small sizes. If the image is bigger than 1024 pixels, it's scaled down so the AI can handle it and then upscaled. Let's say I want to do a 2K landscape image for my YouTube. I select the 2K version, go to Basic Text to Image, and just select the Text to Image workflow. That will load the workflow for me with all the nodes and settings I use. You can add the ones you use most often to favorites. So now it's in bookmarks at the top. If you click the bookmark icon again, it will remove it. Let me open the same workflow also for the Fluxmania model so we can compare the differences. Now, both workflows are open in tabs. Each workflow includes a title so you can see which workflow you're in, what sizes it supports, and the ratio. The difference between the workflows is that one uses the UNet loader node and FluxDev model, and the other uses the load diffusion node and the Fluxmania model. The rest of the nodes and models are the same. When you open a workflow, the first thing you need to do is check that you have the required models and nodes. If a node shows in red, you're either missing a model or the custom node isn't installed. Follow the instructions. It will tell you to download the model and where to put it. So you click here to download the model, navigate to your models folder, look for the diffusion models folder, and save the model there. For the Fluxmania model, it's the same with one difference. Because it's an uncensored model, you need to be logged in to download it. So click here, click sign in, and use Google or whatever you prefer to sign in. Once you're logged in, you should be able to download the model from here and place it in the same diffusion models folder, like with FluxDev. If you have a smaller video card, download a smaller model from here, like a Q4 model instead of Q8, or even smaller. Test a few and keep the one that gives you good quality and runs faster on your system. Then you need a T5 clip model, which you can download from here, or use a smaller version from here. The clip L model can be downloaded from here and placed in the same clip folder as the T5 model. You load those models here in the dual clip loader. For the load VAE node, you need a VAE model, but first you need to log in to Hugging Face and agree to use the model. You have to accept the agreement somewhere here, like mine, which shows I agreed. After that, you can download the model and place it in the VAE folder. For upscaling, I use this upscale model, which you place in the upscale models folder. Of course, you need to install the custom nodes if you don't have them already. There are only 4 nodes in this workflow, so you can search for them by name in Manager under Custom Nodes Manager, search for Easy Use, RG3, and so on until you have all the nodes installed. Then restart ComfyUI. Once you have the nodes and models, it's time to test those workflows. For the first workflow, I will test both models just to see the differences. After that, I'll show you only one model so I don't repeat the same workflow twice. Only the results are different, but the workflows are pretty much the same for both models. I'm using the same seed and prompt to compare the differences. Let's start with the Flux model. For me, the best way to get a high-quality 2K image after upscaling was to use this size for the empty latent image. Let's run the workflow. With Flux, we know the people aren't always the most realistic, and it adds that chin shape we see on a lot of generated faces, so it's not always realistic. Now let's test the Fluxmania workflow with the same settings to see the differences. The result is this one. If we compare both, clearly the Fluxmania model wins for realistic images and people. It adds more imperfections and more desaturated colors, but sometimes you want clear designs like vectors or colorful illustrations, and for that, Flux is still better than Fluxmania. If I try to run the workflow again, nothing happens because I set the seed to be fixed. If you want to change it, click on the arrow or just use a different number. I added an upscaler that can be enabled from here. If the seed is fixed, it will only do the upscale without regenerating the first image. So if you don't like the image, change the seed to a different number and hit run. This is the result. It has some imperfections on the face, but sometimes that can make it look more real. By the way, the time to generate an image is around 30 seconds, and we get this image size. Let's say I like this image and want to make it bigger, like 2K size. I enable the upscaler. I can adjust the denoise level from here. I use 0.7 for Fluxmania because if it's too high, it adds too many imperfections. For Flux, I usually go with 0.8. So let's go with the default value and hit run. The upscaling needs a lot of computer power because it's processing a large image. If you run out of memory, you can use smaller models and also adjust these settings. I'll show you later. So we'll end up with a 2K image, and I use this node that crops a few pixels to get the exact size we want for 2K images. The final result is this one, a 2K image with a lot of details and realism. If I don't like something about it, I can hit run again, and it will run only the upscaler part again with a random seed, so you get a new version of the upscale each time you hit run. The upscaler takes around 100 seconds on my PC, so in total, with generation and upscaling, it's about 2 minutes to get a 2K image. In the output folder, you have the original image and also the upscaled image. So you can use whichever one you need. This was the first upscale, and this was the second one. If I switch between before and after, you can see small differences. If I increase the denoise value, the differences get bigger, but the woman will look less similar to the original image. Another problem Fluxmania has that Flux doesn't is this line you sometimes get on the right side. It can be easily fixed, but it's something to be aware of because it happens sometimes. The model creator said this is the last version for Fluxmania, so we won't get any updates to fix that. Let's open another Fluxmania workflow, this time the image-to-image workflow, so we can upload an image and get a variation of it. Instead of the empty latent node we have in text-to-image, this one has a load image node with an upscale image node to make sure it enters the K sampler at the size I want, and it's encoded with this node. To upload a 16:9 ratio image, just click Choose File and select your landscape image. You can see here how big your image is. I used that size, but if it's different, it will be resized to the size I set here, so I can still get 2K images. I used a simple prompt, a cottage in the forest. The denoise is set to 0.5, and I hit run. Since the denoise isn't too high, I should get a similar image to the original. As you can see, this is the result, and this is the original. It's different, but pretty similar. If I want it to be more different, I increase the denoise value. For example, if I use 0.75, it should have more freedom to change things. And I got this image. See how different it is, but it still keeps something from the original composition and colors. What I don't like is that it looks more like an illustration, while the original was more like a photo. But that depends on the prompt and the model. We know Fluxmania can do realistic images, so we need to change the prompt. I could spend a minute trying to improve the prompt, but a faster way for me is to just use ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to adapt the prompt to make it more real, like a photo, and include the camera it was taken with and more details. It gave me a long, detailed prompt that works great with Flux and Fluxmania models. Since the seed and settings are fixed, you can see how important the prompt is and how different the result looks. Let's run it. And the result is this one. So image to image can be really useful for making variations. Sometimes I do sketches and use image to image to improve them. When you like the result, you can enable the upscaler and run the workflow to get a 2K size image. Now we have a big image with a lot of details. It still has some imperfections. So you can either try a different seed or use Photoshop to fix small mistakes. If you want more details and a more different version from the upscaler, you can increase the denoise value up to 0.8 works, okay? Or even higher depending on the image. At 0.8, it still looks fine, but let's go to the max of 0.95 to see what happens. We get a lot of details, but because it's using tiling, now there's another house here, mushrooms everywhere, even on the tree. Everything has details that shouldn't be there. So don't go too high with the denoise value, especially for the Fluxmania model. Flux works a little better since it doesn't add as many details. Here are some examples where the background was simple, and you can see that high denoise and the tiling settings gave me random houses in the background. Same for this image. I got another door here, so just something to keep in mind. With high denoise, you get more errors. 0.75 or 0.7 is a good starting point. For those who get an error with allocation on device, the error you usually get when you don't have enough video memory, you can sometimes fix it from here. For cards like the RTX 4090, you can go even higher, like 1024 pixels for tile width and height. This generates bigger tiles when it creates the image. But for low-end cards, use something like 512 pixels for width and height, 32 for overlap, and try tile batch with 1 or 2. I can go up to 6 because my system can handle it, and that makes it faster. We tried simple image-to-image and text-to-image workflows, but if you want more control over composition, you'll need to use ControlNet. So in the ControlNet folder, I added 3 examples. Let's start with the canny version. I use the abbreviation CN for ControlNet, and it's a text-to-image workflow with an upscaler. What's different here is that we have a ControlNet model. You need to download this model, rename it like I did here, and place it in the ControlNet folder. You also need this node if you don't have it installed already. If you need more help with this, you can find more info in episode 45 on how it works. The ControlNet model is loaded here, and I just made a simple XMS text on a white background in Photoshop. I used a prompt to describe how I want a 3D golden text. When I run the workflow, it finds the edges of whatever image I load here and tries to generate a similar shaped image. To avoid cropping, you can use the size here for the image you load, which is the same size, or at least a 16:9 ratio. For ControlNet, you can adjust the strength and the N%. The result is this one. From a simple guiding image to a final image that respects the canny map we used in the pre-processor. But you have more options here if you need them. If you get an error with Mat1 and Mat2, it means you have the wrong models mixed. Maybe you used a ControlNet model for SDXL or something else. If you get an incomplete download message for the model, make sure you enable long path support in Windows so ComfyUI can download the models even if the path is too long. If you don't like the result, just use a different seed or prompt. Once you like it, enable the upscaler and get a bigger 2K image. Let's move to the next ControlNet workflow. It's basically the same, but instead of the canny preprocessor, we use the depth preprocessor. I selected the depth anything preprocessor. Let's run it. This one uses a simple toy house or any object you find around. It creates a depth map of that image, and then we get what we prompted for, but with similar depth to our reference image. This can be really useful in situations where it's hard to prompt and get the composition and proportions right. Enable the upscaler, and you get a nice detailed image. Now let's open the third workflow, which uses the pose. I use the DW preprocessor, and this one only works with people. If I run the workflow, it will look at the image and try to create a skeleton in that pose, like this. If you get a black image, that means it didn't find a person in your uploaded image. So make sure for this workflow, you see a skeleton, then you add the prompt and describe what you want to see in that pose. The result is this one. Without ControlNet, it's very hard to prompt the exact pose. In the upscale folder, we have this simple upscaler. You upload the image you want to upscale. It must be a 16:9 ratio. If it's a different ratio, use another workflow for that ratio. Add a prompt that describes the image and run the workflow. You can see the size I set here. No matter what size image you upload, as long as it's 16:9 ratio, it will be resized to this size so the AI can handle it. If the ratio is different, it will be cropped. After upscaling, you get a nice 2K size image. Here is the save result, but I also like to compare before and after. Just move the mouse left and right to see the difference. The higher the denoise value, the more different and detailed the result will be compared to the original. So play with the denoise setting and use a good prompt for better upscaling. For the Flux model with the square ratio, I added some extra workflows that other ratios don't have. For example, this text-to-image collage workflow. It's still a text-to-image workflow, but what's different is the way I prompted it. I have a long prompt here that describes 4 different poses of the same character. The result is this one. And sometimes it can be useful to get different variations of the same character, maybe for LoRA training or other projects. The images aren't always identical, but you can try different seeds until they look similar. The easiest way to use it is to copy the entire prompt and then ask ChatGPT to adapt it to describe what you want it to be. Like a cartoon or a real person, you'll get that long prompt adapted, and you can use it in ComfyUI to get a different collage of 4 images. I prompted the character to look different in each image in case you need a LoRA that wants different outfits. but you can also prompt for the same clothes if you want them wearing the same outfit. Then you enable the upscaler and get a big image that you can crop into 4 different 1024 pixel images. For shorts, you can use these workflows that create 9:16 ratio full HD images. All you need is a good prompt and you can get a nice realistic image. Then you can use the upscaler to get the full HD size. Remember, the settings I use in the tile diffusion node are for my card. You should reduce the values if your card can't handle it. I use this node to make sure I get the exact size, even if it crops a few pixels. And this is the result. A pretty nice and realistic image. If you want to create portrait or 4:5 ratio images, use these workflows. Let's quickly test the text to image. These values were the closest to what I needed to get a similar ratio. The result is this one. And even at that size, it might be good enough for Instagram. But I like to use the upscaler to get the exact size and extra details. You can see in the node the sizes I used. So you'll get 2 images, one at the original size in case you need it for other projects, and one at the exact Instagram portrait size. It's hard to tell if it was made with AI or if it's real. Now, let's move on to something extra about more complex with extra models like LoRA, so we can generate things our base model wasn't trained for. But for Fluxmania, I didn't get very good results with LoRA. Let me open a workflow to explain why. In all Fluxmania workflows, you have a link to the model on Civit AI. You can see I use the latest version called Fluxmania Legacy. For the type, it says checkpoint merge, and it's based on the Flux dev model. Because it's combined with other models, the information it has is similar to Flux, but with more detail, so it creates slightly different results. Now, when you train a LoRA, you choose which model you want to train. Most LoRAs trained on Flux are trained on the Flux dev model, not on the Fluxmania model. So the information is different, and LoRA kind of works, but not as well as with the Flux model. You can get away with some style LoRAs, but for people or LoRAs with faces, the results aren't as good as with Flux. So either you train your own LoRA on Fluxmania and it will work okay, or you use LoRA with the Flux dev model. For Flux dev, I have this folder called LoRA with a text-to-image with LoRA workflow that you can use. If you do have a LoRA trained on Fluxmania and want to use it, you can use this workflow and just replace the UNet loader with the load diffusion model node, then select the Fluxmania model. Right now, we're using the Flux dev model with a Flux dev LoRA loaded in this power loader node. For the LoRA, I added a link here. You can rename the file to something like this. I usually name it the same as the trigger words, then place it in the LoRa's folder and refresh ComfyUI. I added the trigger words here. If you use a different LoRA, add the trigger words for that LoRA and save the workflow, or export it so you have it saved with your settings. Depending on the LoRA, it uses a strength of 1 or less. Some need a little higher, like 1.5, but that depends on the LoRA. You can add extra LoRAs to have multiple ones here. Let's test it. For the prompt I used, I got this result. A nice detailed anime-style illustration with vivid colors, pretty popular on Instagram. If you enable the upscaler, it will use the upscaler together with that LoRA, so it can be a little slower, but the result is a big image with a lot of detail. I mean, look at all those details. I really like this LoRA. Let's disable the upscaler and I'll show you how you can add more LoRAs from Civit AI. On the Civit AI website, click on the Models tab, then go to Filters. Select something like a year for the period. For model type, select LoRA, and for the base model, select Flux Dev. Now you should see only Flux Dev LoRAs in the list. Let's select one to see what it can do. First, we check to be sure it's a LoRA and that it's based on the Flux Dev model. You also need the trigger words to use in the prompt. Let's download this LoRA, navigate to your ComfyUI folder, find the models folder, and inside that, the LoRAs folder. Save your LoRA there. You can give it the same name as the trigger words to make it easier to remember. Let me copy the trigger words, then go to the folder and rename the file. Great, now I know it starts with myth. In ComfyUI, you can add that LoRA. You can search for it, but nothing will appear if ComfyUI was already open. So go to Edit and refresh to update the node definitions. Now I can add the LoRA, search for its name, and select it from the list. You can either disable that LoRA or load it in place of another one. You can enable or disable each individual LoRA. If you right-click, you can remove a LoRA. Also, if you right-click and go to Show Info, you can find more details. Click on Fetch from Civet AI, and you can see the page with all the trained words for that LoRA. Usually, the first one with the biggest number is the one you want to use as trigger words. You can copy it from here, save it here for later, and save the workflow. For the prompt, let's use ChatGPT again. I give it all the details I want and also ask it to include the trigger words. I got this long prompt that I can now use in ComfyUI. If we run the workflow, we get something like this. So the LoRA seems to work okay. It's fantasy themed and adds interesting details. You can test different LoRAs to get a workflow that generates images with your preferences. Then you enable the upscaler and run the workflow again to get a bigger image, 2 times the size in this case with even more details. It's not bad. I could fix some small mistakes in Photoshop and get a nice illustration. I also added an upscaler that supports LoRA. So how is this useful? Let's say you have a LoRA for a character or a person. If you try to upscale the image with just the base model, the model doesn't have information about that person in training, so it might change the face during the upscaling phase. But if you add the same LoRA for the upscaler, it knows how the face looks and keeps that in mind while upscaling. The same goes for style LoRAs and other types. So if you generate an image with a LoRA, you can use the same LoRA for the upscaler to keep the style consistent. Use lower denoise values to keep it more similar to the original and higher denoise values for a more different version. Let me show you another workflow that can be useful. This square text to image collage with ControlNet pose and upscaler. Again, I used a long prompt for this one. What it does is look at an image with multiple poses. You can use Photoshop or take a photo of yourself and make a collage, but try to keep it portrait or medium portrait. If all the subjects are far away, you'll lose some details. It creates a pose map with all the poses from your reference image. If the prompt is right, you can get something like this, like a character sheet showing different angles of your model. This can be useful for LoRA training, 3D artists, and other projects. It's not always perfect, but try different seeds until you get something that works. Since it's a long prompt, it's a perfect job for ChatGPT to adapt it quickly and maybe add something extra like a hat to see how it handles that when there isn't enough space to place the hat. I got the long prompt adapted, added it to ComfyUI, and ran the workflow. The result is this. Not all characters have the hat. Probably because there wasn't enough space to place the hat without cropping, or maybe it's just the seed. Let's try a different seed to see what we get. For some of the images that are full body, you'll lose details in the eyes that can be hard to recover, even with the upscaler. The result with the second seed is this. All have the hat except the close-up one. So it's not perfect, but it can still be useful sometimes. You can upscale it to add more details. Here's another image-to-image workflow that also includes ControlNet, LoRA, and an upscaler. I tried to combine the nodes I use most often. It already took me 3 days to create this tutorial and workflows, so some of them are only done for the square ratio, but you can check the other workflows to see what sizes I used in the upscale image node and adapt them for other ratios. What this workflow does is let you upload an image and get a variation of it in a different style or with a different face using a LoRA. In this case, I want a similar image, but in anime style. It won't keep the face identical. For that, you'd probably need something like a Face ID, but for a simple workflow, it does a decent job. You'll need to adjust the denoise value. Low denoise means the result is more similar to the original image, but the LoRA effect is weaker. Higher denoise gives a more different image, and the LoRA effect is stronger. And the result is this one. We got a different style, but the same pose. It's not ideal for style transfer. If you've seen Flux context, that does this better. But sometimes this workflow can help. And for the last workflow I want to show you, it's this text to image with ControlNet and LoRA. You've seen that with LoRA, you can generate things the original Flux dev model can't do. But sometimes you still need certain control over composition. So combining LoRA with ControlNet can be really useful. I have this toy house, and we get a depth map for it. When it generates with that LoRA, it uses the depth map and creates the image in the style of the LoRA used, in my case, anime style. You can try this with sketches and canny, poses, and so on. It gives you more control over your generation. That's all for today. It took a lot of time to create this video, so please support the channel with a like and a comment, or subscribe to membership. I have 4 different tiers. The highest one is for Legends, and I want to thank them for their continuous support. Don't forget to download the workflows from Discord. Have a great day.